Knack knack. Who's there? Yeah, I'd rather not share that with you. Hey, no sweat. Come on in. Make yourself at home and take anything you want. Wait, you wouldn't let a stranger in your house. Why would you let anonymous traffic scrape your website? Introducing IPinfo's Privacy Detection API, a fast and simple way to detect malicious traffic. Activate your free trial today at ipinfo.io, and don't forget to use the promo code CODESTORY at checkout.
When I say software supply chain, I mean the actual supply chain for software itself, like your code, your dependencies, the build process, the build system, all of that stuff. So I got into this space probably about 4 or 5 years ago now when I was working at Google, where I was at Google for about 9 years before starting ChainGuard. And the first project I did in open source, kind of outside of Google's internal world, was called Minikube. It's the official way to get like a Kubernetes cluster running on your laptop. When it came time to actually do a release of this thing, there was no kind of good, sanctioned, secure way to do a build of this program that the entire community was basically downloading and running as root on their laptops. My name is Dan Lorenc, and I'm a co-founder and CEO at ChainGuard.
This is Code Story, a podcast bringing you interviews with tech visionaries who share in the critical moments of what it takes to change an industry and build and lead a team that has your back. I'm your host, Noah Lappart, and today how Dan Lorenc created a solution for your software supply chain to make it secure by default. All this and more on Code Story. Dan Lorenc got into tech in a roundabout way. Most of his time in school was dedicated to the study of mechanical engineering, building in the world of atoms and machine shops and with 3D printers. He learned how to program through Matlab and he got hooked. He lives in Austin, enjoys taking in the live music scene, and likes to get outdoors when it's not 108 degrees like it was when we did this recording. While Dan was at Google, the well-known Solarwinds attack happened, illustrating the gaps and holes in the software supply chain space. Given he had experience in this area, paired with the Biden administration's executive order to secure this space, this led Dan and his co-founders to give their startup a try. This is the creation story of ChainGuard.
ChainGuard is a pretty new startup. We founded back in October of last year, so 8-9 months ago or something like that. Our kind of goal and overall mission is to help make the software supply chain secure by default. When I say software supply chain, I mean the actual supply chain for software itself, like your code, your dependencies, the build process, the build system, all of that stuff. We don't do software for physical supply chains. That turns out to also be a giant mess right now, and we get a lot of confusion about that. So I got into this space probably about 4 or 5 years ago now when I was working at Google, where I was at Google for about 9 years before starting ChainGuard. And while I was at Google, I had to work on a bunch of different parts of the cloud platform there, mostly in the developer tool space. When containers and Kubernetes and Docker all started to take off, I got pretty lucky and had an opportunity to start working on a bunch of the open source code there. And the first project I did in open source, kind of outside of Google's internal world, was called Minikube. If you're familiar with Kubernetes, Minikube is the official way to get like a Kubernetes cluster running on your laptop. When it came time to actually do a release of this thing, there was no kind of good, sanctioned, secure way to do a build of this program that the entire community was basically downloading and running as root on their laptops. People were just grabbing this 80 meg binary off of GitHub and installing it. Just kind of went down this rabbit hole of installing Jenkins on Mac Minis under my desk that, the security team probably wasn't too happy about, but there was nothing else I could do. It was kind of boring. Nobody really cared or prioritized it for a while, and it just felt like we were bothering everybody and making their lives harder. A bunch of kind of open source supply chain attacks started to rise over the last couple of years. Different package managers like NPM, PyPy, people accounts getting taken over, maintainers deleting code, that kind of thing. But we've also seen it affect enterprises, and that's kind of where the company came from. At the very end of 2020, probably the most famous breach in the space was on Solarwinds. Essentially, one of their build systems got compromised, and an attacker used that to insert malware into their product that they were building and shipping. This is a security product, so it was running in a bunch of sensitive environments, including the US government. That was kind of malware was stealing and exfiltrating data, which led to a whole bunch of new regulations and an executive order from the Biden administration to help secure this part of the ecosystem. So the space kind of picked up overnight, and it seemed like a pretty good time to try a startup.
Okay, so tell me about the MVP. And maybe this is the Mac Minis under your desk or wherever you want to take it. But tell me about the MVP. How long did it take to build, and what sort of tools did you use to bring it to life?
A bunch of our product and strategy is actually around open source because that's kind of in everyone's supply chain, and it's kind of where everything starts. Nobody builds code in a vacuum. 99.9% of organizations, according to some last survey, are using open source, and kind of that 0.01% left, I think, probably misunderstood the question or something. And so we actually had a lot of our MVP and a lot of our ecosystem and kind of a whole community before we started the company, just from a whole bunch of different open source projects. So it was pretty clear which direction we were going to go, and open source stuff already had adoption. And so it was pretty easy to start experimenting and playing with some kind of products around that. We weren't starting from scratch. That would have been much harder.
Okay, so then even with, the open source world and having some things to start with, you probably, and I would even say I could guarantee you did, have to make some decisions and trade-offs, right? About what were you going to make in the short term, what sort of debt you were going to take on. So tell me about those decisions and how you coped with them.
We tried to do kind of the basic startup approach as, close to the book as you can, right? Get some early customers, get some early design partners, people that want to work with you, want to give you feedback. And that was working pretty well. But kind of the problem we ran into is that this is a really new space, and everybody knows that this is a big area of risk from a security perspective, but nobody really knows the answers yet. And there's no kind of one-size-fits-all answer for every organization or every phase in the development lifecycle. And so feedback just kind of started to stall. People would say, that seems like a good idea, or that one seems fine too. So that's kind of, the last thing you want to do at the start is just kind of guess, make stuff up, and hope people like it, right? You want constant feedback, you want to be data-driven. But we just couldn't really get any more data because customers didn't know. They really just wanted us to help them improve security any way possible. So that was kind of one of the big decisions and trade-offs we had to make is, are we really running out of feedback? Are we really going to have to start guessing and kind of leaning on our own expertise? And we did, and it's been working out so far.
That's interesting because, normally you get into a passionate crowd of folks. They're going to give you feedback, left and right, morning and night. And it seems like this is a little bit different.
There's some early feedback you get, some really, high-level directional stuff. But at some point, we're not getting I want that button to be blue, you should put that over here kind of fine-grained stuff anymore. That kind of stopped. We just kind of had to guess and go out on a limb and actually build some products and get them in people's hands before the next kind of wave of feedback started. Mocks and demos and that kind of thing weren't cutting it anymore.
This episode is sponsored by Vanta. You're a startup founder. Finding product market fit is probably your number one priority. But to land bigger customers, you also need security compliance. And obtaining your SOC 2 or ISO 27001 certification can open those big doors. But they take time and energy pulling you away from building and shipping. And that's where Vanta comes in. Vanta is the all-in-one compliance solution helping startups like yours get audit ready and build a strong security foundation quickly and painlessly. How, you ask? Vanta automates the manual security tasks that slow you down, helping you streamline your audit. And the platform connects you with trusted vCISOs to build your program, auditors to get you through audits quickly, and a marketplace for essentials like pen testing. Join over 8,000 companies, including many Y Combinator and Techstars startups who trust Vanta. Simplify compliance and get $1,000 off at vanta.com/codestory. That's VANTA.com/codestory. This episode is sponsored by Kinsta. Between juggling client meetings, managing your website, and keeping up with everyday tasks, who has the time to stress out about website security? Well, with Kinsta, the technical stuff is taken care of, so you can focus on what you do best. Kinsta provides managed hosting for WordPress, offering lightning-fast load times, top-tier security, and unmatched human-only customer support. Whether you're a business owner, web developer, or running a digital agency, Kinsta makes managing your website easy and efficient. Kinsta provides enterprise-grade security, being one of the few hosting providers for WordPress with SOC 2 and other certifications, guaranteeing the highest level of security for your website. Thanks to their unlimited free expert-led migrations, Kinsta ensures a smooth transition for you from other hosting providers. Customers have reported 200% faster load times post-migration to their platform. What I find cool about Kinsta is their fast and reliable customer service and premium features that are included at no extra cost. Ready to experience Kinsta's hosting for yourself? Get your first month free when you sign up at kinsta.com today. That's KINSTA.com. So then from that point, you got your MVP, right? You've got enough feedback and you've got enough expertise to be building the product. How did you progress it and mature it? And what would be interesting is how did you build your roadmap and decide, okay, this is the next most important thing to build or address?
That problem we ran into before kind of started to inform the roadmap of, we need feedback. We really want feedback. We're not getting it. So let's build something, get it in people's hands, and then get that next wave of feedback. So the roadmap turned from being kind of feature-based to how do we get the next set of feedback that we need from the next set of organizations? And let's go do that. And if that involves, running a survey, cool, we can figure that out. But it involved actually building products and finding people willing to install them in their production environments. So that's kind of where we went. We tried to keep stuff as lean as possible, like really MVP focused of like, will you actually take this and kind of hand this to your DevOps team, have them install it in, production or development environment, and use it every single day. From there, once you actually get 3 or 4 or 5 organizations that are doing that, then the feedback starts pouring in. And then you can kind of shift back to normal kind of customer-driven development.
So let's switch to team, Dan. How did you go about building your team? And what do you look for in those people to indicate that they're the winning horses to join you?
Yeah, that was one of the easiest things for us, honestly. Since it's such a new space, the whole software supply chain security space, it's a pretty tight-knit network of folks that have been working on it for longer than, the last couple of months before it got pretty popular. From having been in this space for a while, we had a pretty big network there of those folks that were interested in this, had expertise, enjoyed it, and wanted to keep working in the space. So it was pretty easy to hire from our network. We had a big kind of founding team too. There were 5 of us at the start. By combining all of those networks, we were able to get off to a pretty quick start with hiring and get a bunch of people that we had all known and worked with for years, and didn't really need to dip too far into the kind of interview, screening, kind of blind hiring process.
Well, let's flip to scalability then. So did you build this to scale efficiently from day one, or, have you been fighting this as you've grown? And I think it's going to be interesting, the combination of the solutions that you're using in the early days, but I'm curious where you're going to take it. So tell me about scalability.
On the engineering side, we've obviously all worked on kind of big distributed systems for a while. Scalability comes up a lot, but it kind of turns out that kind of in this space you're in with software builds and metadata about kind of software itself. Things tend to be a lot lower on the scale requirements than they are in other areas, right? If you build a piece of software you're going to deploy, it's going to run, and it's going to serve a lot more requests than that one build itself, almost tautologically. And so kind of the amount of data that you're dealing with from kind of dependency managers and everything can seem big, but in perspective, right, this isn't petabytes or terabytes of data that an organization is going to have to deal with. It's kind of a couple zeros shaved off from whatever they're dealing with in production. The scaling problems there are a little bit different, more about keeping things fast and interactive for developers rather than dealing with massive amounts of data or QPS or anything. Yeah, the team side has definitely been more interesting, right? There were 5 of us in October and there's 46 of us now. So kind of every time, we add another 5 or 10 folks or another job function or something like that, we kind of have to relearn how to do all of this. And especially in this remote environment, right? There are a lot of startups that were kind of full remote before. Things are a little bit different now in this pandemic world. Even getting together is hard. Communication is tough. Every time we come up with a process, it feels like we outgrow it and need a new one 2 weeks later.
So as you step out on the balcony, you look across all that you've built, what are you most proud of?
Definitely the team, right? We're still pretty early. We're tackling a big problem. We've got a lot of awesome stuff coming, a lot of awesome products and open source projects coming down the pipeline. But this team that we've been able to hire and assemble is definitely the thing that I'm most proud of here at the company.
Let's flip the script a little bit then. So tell me about a mistake you made and how you and your team responded to it.
Yeah, definitely in kind of startups, especially this is my first time. This is a lot of our first time being in an early stage startup like this. You don't know the questions you're supposed to ask. Like there's a lot of unknowns that you don't find out until later. The very first decision we made when you're setting up a company and incorporating is, where do you actually incorporate? Where do you put the headquarters? Companies always incorporate in Delaware, but you still need an address for the company. And we thought it didn't matter. We could just pick anything, so we picked one of the houses. Turned out that there are a lot of implications for which state that your headquarters is in, and we didn't find that out until much later. It limited the healthcare plans we were able to get. That was one of the hardest things we had to go do. He now has something like 45 compliance posters that get shipped to his address because that's our official office. Every time somebody gets started, we have to put those workspace safety things up, so they're all sitting in his room. Yeah, just kind of basic stuff like that you don't figure out until much later.
What does the future look like for the product and for your team? Obviously, you've grown quite a bit in a really short amount of time. This is a popular space. What does the future look like?
Yeah, that's been pretty interesting too, just kind of the crazy shifting market conditions across the whole venture capital landscape and the software space in general, even at the public markets. 2020 and 2021 were kind of crazy in a lot of perspectives that way. Money was basically free. Startups were fundraising, every 6 or 8 months. Valuations were crazy, all because kind of interest rates were so low. And then all of a sudden that changed at the start of 2022. So everybody's kind of readjusting to that new landscape. Thankfully, we were a little early on that side and hadn't made too many mistakes there yet. But yeah, you see a lot of companies, unfortunately, having to go through layoffs and restructuring and everything to adjust to the new kind of rules at play in this whole world. So I think growth is a little bit different. It looks a little different now, especially on kind of the sales and marketing side. A lot slower, a lot more of a focus on profitability rather than just kind of growth at all costs.
So, okay, Dan, let's switch to you. Who influences the way that you work? Tell me someone you look up to and why.
Oh man, I really lean on our team here, right? All of the other founders and all the other people in leadership here. Being a CEO is lonely in a lot of ways, right? You kind of have to make a lot of decisions, but being able to gather feedback and kind of just chat over, tough decisions with people that you trust and have worked with for years and years and years is really a big help. Being able to lean on them to actually get frank and honest answers and not just things that I want to hear on tough decisions has been the most helpful.
Well, okay, we talked about a mistake a minute ago, but a little bit different spin. If you could go back to the beginning, what would you do different? Or where would you consider taking a different approach?
Easiest answer there is I would have started earlier, 6 months earlier or something like that, right? That we got asked that a lot. Why are you starting the company now? And it was 6 months ago probably would have been better, but now is the best time we possibly can. Waiting isn't going to make it any better. But yeah, I think 2 years earlier probably wouldn't have worked because there just wasn't enough attention to the space. 6 months, a year, something like that probably would have been put us in a little bit better of a position. So we're playing a little bit of catch up.
Well, Dan, last question. So you're getting on a plane and you're sitting next to a young entrepreneur who's built the next big thing. They're jazzed about it. They can't wait to show it off to the world. Can't wait to show it off to you right there on the plane. What advice do you give that person, having gone down this road a bit?
Yeah, kind of same answer that I just gave before almost. Just go for it. Get started. And show stuff as often as you possibly can. And I know there's a lot of different schools of thought there on whether you stay stealth until you have a big launch moment or something like that. But I think just get started early and show stuff as early and frequently as you can. Don't hide stuff. Don't keep secrets. Just start getting feedback. Start showing everything you're doing to the world as early as you possibly can and tell that story.
Amazing advice. Well, Dan, thank you for being on the show today. Thank you for telling the creation story of ChainGuard.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And this concludes another chapter of Code Story. Code Story is hosted and produced by Noah Labhart. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the podcasting app of your choice. Support the show on patreon.com/codestory for just $5 to $10 a month. And when you get a chance, leave us a review. Both things help us out tremendously. And thanks again for listening.
Now Taxes is 100% free when you file in the TurboTax app if you didn't file with us last year.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, just do your own taxes in the app by 2/18.
What if I have lots of forms?
All good, all 100% free.
What if I had 3 jobs?
Still 100% free.
What if I once saw Bigfoot?
That has nothing to do with taxes, so still 100% free.
Now that's what I'm talking about.
Now this is taxes. See if you qualify in the TurboTax app. Excludes TurboTax Live. Must start and file in app by 2/18.